Hi, everyone, and welcome back to STR Rev Talk. My name is Bart-Jan. I'm the CEO and founder of Otamiser and Otamiser, and I'm excited to kick off today's session. Today, we're diving into Airbnb's 2025 winter release and looking at how those new features that they are releasing interact with Airbnb's underlying ranking model. The goal is simple: help you understand how you can leverage those new winter releases in your overall strategy for 2026. We will discuss the four core pillars behind Airbnb's ranking system and walk you through every new release they did. I'm joined today by John and Frank. Welcome, everyone. John, the floor is yours to do a quick 1-minute introduction.
Hey everyone, pleasure to be here. My name is John deRoulet. I'm the head of revenue management education at Wheelhouse. Been with Wheelhouse about 5 years, getting the opportunity to work with revenue managers and property managers all over the world on their revenue management. Wheelhouse is a dynamic pricing platform and full revenue management suite. So we work with professional revenue managers at scale pretty much everywhere. Prior to that, I was a revenue manager in the space for almost a decade. So I've been doing this through all of the changes on distribution, all the advancements kind of in revenue management. And it's basically been my niche the entire time I've been in the career. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome.
That was fast, John. All right. So hello, everyone. I'm Frank Bosi. I'm the Senior Director of Partnerships here at Hostfully. I've been here since 2020, so approaching my 6th year. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Hostfully, what we do is we're a property management software where we essentially help short-term rental operators scale without losing control. We have a property management software, digital guidebooks, as well as Hostfully devices that can automate the home itself and the process and just kind of ensuring a seamless beginning to the reservation. And again, there are a ton of property management softwares out there. Hostfully's big thing is we want to be the right fit for you. So we have different focuses on growth and customer success and guest experience. So whether you manage one property or 500 properties, Hostfully really helps you run smarter, faster, more profitable as well, especially when your platform is built for real world operations and just real world results.
I like that. Welcome. And for everyone in the audience, if you have any questions, please submit them here in the chat and our team will answer them right away so you don't have to wait for the end. Before we go to Airbnb's new release, I want to guide you guys and I want to guide the audience through, okay, how is the Airbnb algorithm acting today? What is really impacting how you show up in search? We always distinguish it in 4 key pillars. It's your price, where I believe John has a lot of interesting stuff to say about. It's your reviews. How is your review scores? How are your different components? It's your content. How accurate is your content? How appealing is your value proposition to those guests? And at the 4th and most important and mostly overlooked is competitor performance. How is your competitor actually behaving on reviews, content, and price? Because they're all interrelated. So those are the 4 most important components actually compile how your listing shows up in search, with all of them different ways for different markets. But before we dive into that, let's look at how did the guest journey on Airbnb actually look like? Airbnb, when they were creating their search rankings in the beginning of Airbnb, they assumed, okay, we will have a unique advantage because we will be able to train our models based on booking behavior of guests. So if a guest books something, we will know, okay, this is something which other guests may want. But the quickest thing they noticed was, okay, but guests, they on average book 2 stays a year. And if they book those 2 stays, those guest types are different. One of their stays may be with their family, the other is for work or with friends. They always book a completely different stay. So they didn't had enough or a big enough data set, especially in the early days when Airbnb was much smaller. So what Airbnb started doing, they started looking at, okay, what are all the impactors that can influence booking? That could be the duration a guest spent in the app. That could be the decision to click or not to click on a listing from a guest behavior. That could be the amount of times you scroll through a picture. That could be if you book, if you don't book. That could be if you message your host first or if you don't message your host first as a guest. So If we now take that insights and move it to, okay, how does that booking journey now looks like? If you look at the first search, this is a mobile search where we are impersonating a potential guest. In this example, a guest looks at 3 listings, just scrolls past them. It's an impression. So Airbnb knows, okay, this impression is not appealing enough for the guest to click, but on the 4th one, they click. This is a good signal for listing 4. Let's go to same search with different guests. Here, Airbnb shows them a certain search ranking where that guest clicks on listing number 1 and number 4. Again, gives signals to the Airbnb algorithm that on number 1, they like it, they convert from first page to listing, and on number 4, they convert. Then on search number 3, they click, reject, click, and impression. So the guest starts doing multiple steps. But what do we mean with rejection? Rejection is they go from the first page to the listing, they scroll to the pictures, go to the booking page, and then at the last step, they notice price is not about right. I don't feel like this price equals the value proposition I want to get. Maybe the price is too high for the dates. Maybe I want a certain amenity that is not there. In the last step, another guest, they see 4 different listings and they decide to book one and the first listing. That booking is the highest utility that gains to the algorithm. That algorithm knows, okay, all the signals leading here leads to a booking, which is good for Airbnb. But what I want to show you guys, what I want to show the audience with this example is all the little steps a guest takes in the Airbnb algorithm, in their Airbnb search, actually compile to how you're showing up in search, but also what is your booking probability? How likely are you going to be booked? Because it's first about getting those eyeballs on your listing, and then the last part is the guest making the assessment, is this value proposition something I would love to pay for? Now, if we summarize that, how does Airbnb rank? And this will be very important if we transfer that to the latest Airbnb release. So we have long-term signals and short-term signals. Long-term signals are host dependent and guest dependent. For example, what's the booking history of that one listing, but also of that one guest? How many reviews have that listing ever gotten? Or how many reviews has that guest ever given? All those little things compile to the long-term signals impacting search. But there are also a lot of short-term signals. Okay, what is the recent searches you did from your browser or you did from your device actually to go to a certain region? But also, how many clicks did that listing have in previous sessions from similar guests? So all those little things will compile how you show up in search. And it's always important, if you think about Airbnb and Airbnb ranking, that the positioning you have in those searches, 75% of all the bookings, this is from an Expedia research, go to the first 15 listed on an OTA, on Airbnb. So the first 15 places are golden, are AAA. If you now go to what are the most important updates of the newest Airbnb release, we have Airbnb released Book Now, Pay Later, flexible cancellation policy, and new ranking related features. Book Now, Pay Later. Essentially, with the newest winter release, guests can already start booking, but can pay their reservation price at a later end. John, how do you think this will impact how a revenue manager actually has to set their strategy?
The Book Now, Pay Later is kind of interesting to me because I was following it really closely when they announced it earlier in the year, and I know it caused a lot of panic among property managers because there's obviously implications to that. What are they going to do? The way that they released it in the US, to me, seems kind of low impact, honestly. And also, one, in terms of like, it's not something that property managers, I think, have to be that worried about right now. In the US and then now in Europe and other parts of the world where they released it in this winter one, they're really restricting it down to basically just stuff that already has flexible cancellation. So stuff where the user is already entitled to basically get a refund. So from our side, it may not actually look that different. I do think it may enable a little bit more cancellation. In Europe, Booking.com is like the main channel, but in the United States, Booking.com is not as adopted widely. And part of that, I think, has to do with the high rates of cancellation because the property manager is the merchant on record. It's actually there's a lot of cancellation around not being able to collect the payment. And I think that people will use that to kind of reserve stuff that they're not really ready. They really haven't made the full decision that they're going to make. So we may see a little bit more turn, but I don't think it's going to have a huge impact on the user. I do think from a consumer perspective, it may be quite a bit better. We'll see if people actually have the money to pay for these things when the payment comes up. That's kind of an unknown, and that'll have to depend on how you think like the economy is in your area and among your consumer base. That could result in a little bit more turn, but in general, I don't think this is a major move for them quite yet. I do think there's some interesting implications, though, in the future. If they see that this is really successful in driving customer adoption, I'll be really curious to see if they extend this to other cancellation policies and and really segment it down, like allow people to pay in parts. That's the thing that was really interesting to me. If they allow people to pay pieces at a time as they approach, and that becomes the cancellation policy, I think that's really what's going to benefit most property managers who, in essence, if you're not doing smaller properties or high transaction properties, you probably have a more strict cancellation policy anyway. So that's my kind of perspective. It's not a huge thing yet. It's an implication to something that could be really interesting in the future. It does. I do hope that it generates a little bit more reservations. There's probably going to enable that subsegment of people who already is willing to inconvenience themselves to look for a better deal to keep turning a little faster. But I don't know that you really need to change your policies or your transactions for it. The one thing you may want to look at from a revenue management perspective is process side. It's when flexible cancellation policies are coming up, really be aware of what your pricing is on your existing inventory, whether or not you're opted into this, because you might see a boost in bookings as people, if you're priced right, or you may be able to actually boost your bookings by pricing right, because people can make a decision to change if you're right in that window or before that window.
Do you foresee booking windows changing or some booking windows shifting because people will have the feeling that they can already buy something with money they might not have at the moment, so they can secure a deal a bit earlier? Or what's your forecast on that change of behavior?
I think it makes sense that would occur. I don't know how much of the customer base is going to be like that. I also think, like I kind of mentioned before, because it's restricted down to this flexible and like very flexible policies, a lot of traditional PMs may not actually notice it in their market because they need to be on like something that's a little bit more strict. If you're in an urban market, you may see that, but they're already pretty short booking windows. Like people are just making the decision later. So you may see them actually book a little further in advance, but you have to take that with a little bit of grain of salt. I think actually what it's pointing to is and this is related to just having more flexible cancellation policies in general. The price needs to be right all the time. Having a really high premium and getting that magical high booking isn't like a locked-in thing. So if you have these cancellation policies or they continue to push out policies like this, it really means that like your price has to be competitive and correct for the season year round, because if the guest overpaid, they have opportunities to like realize that they didn't in the past.
Frank, how are you looking at book now, pay later? How is it going to affect property managers or impact? Yeah, I think it's good that we have John on the call for the pricing and all that verbiage that I have no idea about. That's why we leave it to Wheelhouse to do it for us. But I think on the kind of the booking behavior from the guest is going to change in a big way, obviously. I mean, anytime that you reduce upfront costs, you ultimately expand the top of the booking funnel, because guests who were previously price sensitive and who were hesitant to make that purchase right then and there, or who were waiting for, their end of week, end of month paycheck or the year-end bonus, those individuals can now lock in that reservation. Say they have a reservation now, if they're able to pay it in later, who knows? We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But when platforms introduce this like split payment approach or deferred payments, you're going to get booking windows are going to be a lot longer, as John mentioned, and I expect like at least like a 5-15% extension in booking windows, depending on the market and the price point, like John said, with urban markets and all. But you're ultimately going to get more impulsive, short notice bookings. Like zero down reservations removes any hesitation for last minute trips. So this creates this like wider spread, more early bookings, and more late bookings too. So for property managers, it's contingent on the property manager, but this means demand gets smoother and your pacing curves are going to shift earlier in the cycle than we have been seeing historically.
Interesting. Do you guys foresee other OTAs adapting to this kind of models?
They kind of all follow one another. So once one has a certain module or a certain model, the others normally follow. But I think a lot of the OTAs are going to wait to see how this pans out and how successful it is, or to find the good medium. Like John said earlier, kind of like pay in buckets. I think it's going to ultimately follow if it's successful. But I'm curious to hear what you two have to say about it.
I would agree with that. I mean, the interesting thing is that the other large OTAs are hotel oriented, and in many cases they are buy now, pay later already as a standard. And it's much easier for a hotel to absorb. They don't have the same like kind of binary problem on the listings where like, hey, if the listing ends up not being booked within 7 days, I have a huge problem. Whereas in a hotel, like they're forecasting for vacancy. That's the whole concept of overbooking. You overbook because you're not going to collect all the reservations. So in a way, they're already doing it, and we can do it. We just don't. So it'll be interesting to see. I think they will let Airbnb prove it out to see if it's valuable, and then probably push to encourage us to adopt it. I don't know if we will.
That's interesting. So as you were referring to the hotels in Europe on Booking.com, you have a Swedish partner called Klarna. Klarna is reserve now, pay later. That's their big slogan. So it's exactly doing this. It's a payment method on some of the hotels here in Europe. And what the data shows there is that it has the biggest impact on actually Gen Z, millennials, people who are being raised with this kind of purchasing behavior. With my generation, that's fair. No, but with generation that are being raised with this kind of behavior. So if we look at the data there from the hotel side of things, we see that there is an increase in booking behavior because it gets rid of the purchasing barriers. You don't have the same feeling anymore, the mental feeling when you make a purchase that you actually bought it because you buy it in pieces.
Yeah, we do also know that like I mean, I do think there will be a boost. It's just whether or not people will be able to pay for it actually results in an end boost for the revenue of the supplier. We know that like layaway programs at retail in the United States are really successful. I don't know about European populations, but American populations are not very responsible with credit. So they will buy something they cannot afford. And so, from the booking side, probably we'll see that that's beneficial. It's just like, is the populations actually going to have the money to purchase the item when the payment comes due is going to be the question in 6 months.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
9 months.
It will, in my opinion, it will also change Airbnb's model a bit, or their what they offer as a company, because right now they're banking, like they're advanced paying for a customer, even though the property manager only gets the money after. But what if a customer disappears, don't pay? They will probably own the whole legal side of things, of chasing the money and so on. So might change a bit how Airbnb operates as a company as well. Yeah. If you look at one or the second release or another release they did in their winter release, is the flexible cancellation policy. And actually, this is one I am very excited about, something we have been playing with at Otamiser and Otrank for a long time, like changing cancellation policies based on booking behavior, based on booking pace and so on, but in an automated fashion. But now Airbnb can offer that. So that's, especially for revenue managers, changes a lot. But how Airbnb will actually enable it, they will let you choose your desired dates on your calendar where you can change your cancellation policy. For example, for high demand days or event dates, you will be able to go very strict, where your regular policy is maybe very flexible. Frank, how are you looking at this change and what will be the impact?
I mean, it's going to be extremely useful if you don't overuse it, right? So like the winning strategy, I think, is going to be flexible when demand is weak during slow seasons, but then also change it and be firm when the demand is strong. When you know there's a historical event that's happening in your market, you want to be firm there. And the thing with the flexible policies during like the low or shoulder seasons is what's going to happen is this is going to increase conversion because guests feel safer booking. But then you're also going to want to pair it with strong messaging. All right. You want to make sure, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but your verbiage, your description, what you communicate to your guest, and just like I said, pair it with strong messaging, like free cancellation until a certain date. But then even the stricter policies during your peak dates, during your high demand periods, they don't necessarily need flexibility to convert because firm cancellation rules protect you from those speculative bookings, which will, again, ultimately increase until you pay later.
Definitely. John, as a revenue management, we'll call you a revenue management professor, how is this impacting strategy?
I think this is hands down the biggest thing in this release, and it's hidden at the bottom of the page, completely silly. It's like, they just throw it out there. Oh, and for you, host, we have this, right? But it's fantastic. It's like something that as a revenue manager, I have really been pushing. I've actually talked to some of the smaller OTAs in the space. I'm like, you should really do this. This is something revenue managers want. We already changed the price. A differentiator is being able to set your cancellation policy. And I think this is going to be really, really huge for users that leverage Airbnb. The first kind of piece of it is that that low-hanging fruit is just exactly what Frank said. It's your low demand seasons, right? Minimum length of stay, and really most restrictions we put in place are meant to protect your high season revenue. But whenever you're in a situation where you're trying to drive occupancy, having a lower length of stay is beneficial. And people just haven't done that because if you lower your length, or sorry, not your length of stay, your cancellation policy, you run the risk of people booking early for your summer and that not being very protected revenue, not being a sure thing. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is, as soon as this comes out, you should be going and throwing up different cancellation policies for your low seasons, consider different ones for your shoulder seasons, and really put yourself in the position to drive occupancy when it's low occupancy in the market. There's a few kind of caveats to this that I think people need to be considering. One of them is that reach out to your PMS and ask them, this is going to be new. We don't know what's available, but the first one is ask them if it's even compatible, right? We know that promotions sometimes, as PMSs have gotten better and better connections with Airbnb, we've gotten better at this, but sometimes the connections interrupt the ability to use things on Airbnb specifically. So you want to make sure that this isn't being overwritten and that it's actually usable. Second, go into Airbnb and see if it is a promotion. If they are really seeing it as a promotion, it might be, not only might it be compatible, but it's definitely going to be a benefit for you on there. Even if you don't want to make major changes, you should at least have some on there because they're going to prioritize promotions on their own site. They see that as you offering something for your own site. The third one is make sure your CS teams can tell either in your PMS that they have information or somewhere that it's really obvious that you have different cancellation policies. That's something when I was at Stay Alfred, we used to do marketing promotions where we would use the cancellation policy as a lever for our direct. But one of the harder parts for us was to make sure our CS team could actually tell that a reservation was booked under that cancellation policy, because normally we don't have to deal with that. But it does add a level of complexity that your ops team needs to be able to handle well. Otherwise, it kind of make guests mad. And lastly, mirror it on your own site. If you do set some of these up in Airbnb, which I highly recommend you do, make sure that it's also available in your direct situation, so that you're not beating yourself with the OTA.
Makes sense. The way where I'm also super excited about this one, because it comes back to the value proposition. In the end, when a guest wants to book, they buy a certain value at a certain price. But for a long time, the value was quite constant and only the price was changing. But right now, Airbnb allows it to change the value proposition being influenced by cancellation policy, by minimum length of stay, by which amenities you offer and so on. But right now they start to fragment the value value proposition in, okay, now this can change from certain days. So it's all getting more dynamic, which is a trend I'm very much in favor for. Before we jump to the next releases, which are more search results related, I want to jump back to one of the first slides of the presentation. It's actually the 4 key pillars of the Airbnb algorithm. So that's content, price, reviews, and competitor performance. I'm very interested, John and Frank, to hear both of your opinions on what are the most untapped options within the way how Airbnb's score is built, and then we will jump to, okay, what are the newest advancements they made? Maybe Frank, for you the first, what is one of the major aspects that a property manager can still tap into to start optimizing their value proposition they're offering to potential guests?
So I think, and you're talking about like what the most untapped, right?
Exactly, the most untapped
opportunity from these 4.
Yep.
I want to know if John has the same one I have. His might be price. Mine is definitely content. It's almost always content. Most managers really underestimate how much Airbnb's ranking model relies on like a structured, machine readable description and content that you provide. We do have a lot of users that have 1, 2, 3 listings that are new to the industry, and we, on onboarding, even on demos, they have a ton of questions, and it's always like, how do I get more visible on Airbnb? And or any other channel. And again, I always bring up content. The listing titles that clearly communicate your value, I think is super important, along with the descriptions. You want to use very simple, consumer-friendly language. And then you want to make sure all of your amenities are complete and checked off correctly, and making sure that those amenities are up to date and desirable for your avatar guest. But then, of course, you have the high resolution photos. That's top notch, because like you showed earlier, Bart, with like the impression, and then the click. It's the impression right from the get-go. If you have nice photos, you increase your chances of someone clicking on the reservation, reading that description, and then making that reservation. And because Airbnb's system ultimately converts all of this into embedding, like having an incomplete or a low quality photo or content ultimately means that, the model is just, Airbnb's model, or even some other OTAs as well, like it simply can't understand your listing's value. So your visibility goes down. But what I've also seen are property managers tend to acknowledge, and they're really good at pricing, and their focus is on pricing, and they're aware that their reviews are important. But content is, in my opinion, again, really the pillar that still has the widest performance gap in improvement.
I couldn't agree more. Because that's, as you said, it taps back to value proposition. What does a guest on a certain day want? What do they want to read? What do they want to convert on before they actually pay the price? So, John, was Frank's assumption correct that your pillar is price?
I'm going to give you kind of like maybe a complicated conditional answer, because these are really interrelated, right? Like price and competitor performance are really interrelated. Yeah. Content reviews, like, as subjects, are kind of interrelated too. Yeah. It's like, and it comes down to that value proposition. I would say, like, as we think of a timeline, like, obviously content is first. If you have bad content, it doesn't matter what your price is. But then if you have good content, your price has to be correct as well. And if the price, and that's related to your competitors' performance, right? Your price is only correct if your competitors, make sense. And then also that both you and your competitors match the consumer. There's a situation in revenue management where sometimes you have to ask, is the market even in line with what the consumer is doing? And so I would kind of say that, like, price is really important if you aren't very in tune with what the market and the consumer are doing. You really need to there's the biggest opportunity there. If you just like figure out where the consumer is, you're going to beat your competitors. But if you're pretty in tune with where the price is and you kind of understand the market, then it switches back to content and reviews. Like, at the end of the day, if you've been listening to the revenue management conversations I've been having with revenue managers around the world, we're in a situation where the market is down, the conversation is not about price. It's about content and getting seen. It's about getting impressions and getting clicks and getting conversions, because at the end of the day, the price conversation is, hey, the market's down. It's going to be a race to the bottom if the price is the only lever we have. So price is really, really important. If like you're not very, your pricing plan isn't very in touch with the market, or the market's not very optimized, right? Then you can spend time just like beating everyone else by figuring out where the consumer is. Once it's kind of clear that you're in a good spot, or the market itself is not in a good spot, and that the price is just going to start eroding, you need to find your value proposition back on that content review side.
Okay. Oh, makes sense. That definitely suffices me. And let's move to the newest releases on the search results aspect. So let me enlarge the screen here. So Airbnb, in their newest winter release, they have released two important things that are flexible carousels and improved maps. So guests can now tap on any point of interest to see summary on how far it is actually from, or how far the home is actually from their search radius. Again, highlighting for Airbnb the distance to certain landmark, because Airbnb knows, okay, distance is one of the key influencers in value proposition. Value proposition is something which Airbnb wants to maximize. But if we then, for example, move to the flexible carousels, is when a guest is searching for a stay, they will actually see no more options just outside of their search criteria. This comes back to something which is embedded into the Airbnb algorithm called context embedding. Airbnb will embed and cluster listings that have the same historical behavior, or that they see from a value proposition, maybe from an amenity, maybe from a booking history, all perform the same. So a guest looking for a certain home, they will instantly show recommended homes that fill within that criteria, which for them, again, they're A/B testing on any user on their platform. So they might maybe show something completely different just for you to actually test it. John, from which of those two are you most excited about?
Yeah, I actually think this is another kind of like major, like this is another big piece of this release, right? It's not as sexy because it's kind of back end stuff, but like the reason we're paying these commissions to Airbnb is so that they can market these properties well. And so improvements like this are really interesting. I think the flexible carousels are probably the most fascinating for us here, just because, you know, at the end of the day, it does tell us one thing that Airbnb knows: location is king. And unfortunately, you can't change the location of your property. But they do know that there's other things that users are buying on, and that you can potentially increase your value proposition or overcome some of the location stuff by matching that up with the guest. Obviously, price is going to be a big component of that out of your previous model. You can increase your value proposition by just being well priced. And so considering that, you can, you know, it gives you more options if you're just trying to like get heads in beds. But I do think you know, both of these kind of have a little bit more to do with kind of matching to the guest profile. And so if you have a property that's really good for certain kinds of guests, like, hey, we're really a family-oriented property, or we're a larger property that's a little outside the center, but there's not a lot of large stuff in the center, really making sure you have those content keywords and those things that's going to tell Airbnb that, like, hey, if this is a family looking, this may be a better option than what's exactly in the area they're looking at. And so thinking about what your property is really excels with, what customer types it really is built for, and is better for, making sure that's all in the content. It comes back to that content side. Like, price is easy, price is triage, content's your long game, right? And so I think these are really interesting. I don't know exactly how. I think it's going to be a lot of creative thinking, and maybe Bart-Jan will tell us what's actually interesting there, what they're thinking of telling folks to do, you know?
Okay, I will keep that for the last, but maybe first, Frank, what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, I don't like the flexible carousel. When I look for a listing, I'm very type A. I want I want all the listings within walkable distance to it. I don't want to have other options. However, I'm just one person. But ultimately, I think there are two new opportunities to capture more guests and to give property managers that much more visibility that they normally wouldn't have had. But ultimately, what I think it really comes down to is, like, now the property manager just has to make sure that everything is relevant, and to just provide as much context as possible, because the more context and the more descriptions and information you provide, will have you show up on a specific search. If you're missing one thing that you have but you didn't include, you're kind of screwed. You're not really benefiting as much from this new dynamic carousel options that Airbnb is now showing listings outside of the search. You could kind of lose that opportunity. So it's a good thing. Personally, I'm not a fan, but I could see the benefit of it.
So that's exactly why we decided a while back to build Otamiser, because those keywords are very hard to actually change in a dynamic fashion for property managers, for revenue managers, for anyone engaged in the listing composition. Those keywords impact your value proposition because it impacts the guests that you're attracting. It impacts the reviews you will be receiving because it sets a certain value perception. So that's exactly why we do it in a completely automated fashion, because there's so much going on, so many data particles going on, that we change it dynamically. So you show up higher in those flexible carousels, because those flexible carousels is super interesting because it creates a whole new guest journey. That whole new guest journey will start on, okay, you will have a property with 10 amenities. You didn't convert. Okay, so Airbnb will try you with other amenities. So they will hyper personalize. And that's exactly why we build Otamiser, because we want to make sure that those keywords, those searches are always up to date and you show up as much in search as possible. Gentlemen, to come to the last part of this webinar, what would be your property manager tip for 2026, how they can optimize their revenue? It's a very broad question, but what would be the tip that you would give to a property manager? Look, if you pull that lever or if you push that button, you can see your revenue increase.
Yeah, there's quite a lot, but I would say for most users, it is that I mentioned it before. Price is kind of triage to make sure you're priced right. But ironically, the way I would say, like, if you don't know if you're, it's really hard to know if you're priced right or if the market's priced right. Like, that's why there's whole positions in companies that do just try to figure this out and argue it. I would actually go still back to the distribution side. Go look and see if you're getting impressions, right? And then go look and see if you're getting clicks. If you're not, maybe use the hunch that maybe my price is not correct yet, and go maybe make some adjustments and see if you can change that story. But go look at your impression and click through data and see, on these listings, how are these listings actually appearing? Because if they're not appearing, you're not going to get a booking. And a way to make them appear is to make them really have a high value proposition through price. But it all starts there. Is go start to get some of that data. And I'm pretty sure they make it available on Airbnb. I don't know if anyone can pull it in anywhere, but it'd be really nice if it could be aggregated for one of you guys. Figure that out. I can answer it. You cannot pull in the impressions. You cannot pull it in legally. However, for example, we scrape ranking, which for us is like the proxy of where do you show up in searches. But Frank, I will first share my tip, and then I will let you close the webinar. So, to what you're saying, John, distribution is actually what I'm seeing as well. We're in this down market. We're in this first time in a very long bull run of the market where things are not every market is growing as much. So it's actually about, okay, now it's debugging from an e-commerce perspective, or just like how websites did it after the internet boom. How can we make sure people buy again? And it's distribution. It's making sure that your listings show up consistently, and that your value proposition is there. So my biggest tip is let listing optimization not be a buzzword, and look at things holistically in 2026. I am a firm believer that we should change as an industry the name from revenue managers to revenue creation managers, where you're responsible for creating revenue, and that you can do with prices, but also with marketing, distribution. Yeah. Frank, you can end the session.
Yeah, I like your strategic analytical approaches. But even with, I think just for the property managers that are out there that are just getting started or that are just trying to figure out all these new changes, is once there is an update and once there is a change, like, research it, learn it, and then master that channel and what that channel specifically needs for you to gain your visibility. Because again, it ultimately comes down to just make sure you have great content. There are channel specific pricing. So you want to make sure, like Vrbo is usually historically a little bit higher than Airbnb. So just master those differences, understand those differences, because you want this like intentional diversification with your listings and amongst the different channels. So I'm going to kind of give content as my answer again. And, you know, it's what the guest sees right off the bat. It's what's going to set you apart from your competitors. Again, your pricing is recommended, whether you're using a tool or if you're doing your own research. It's based on your competition. So you kind of just have to think outside the box on how can I outdo my competition. And there's just so many ways. And I think just maintaining the consistency, complete content across every channel, make sure your descriptions are full, make sure you're using the right words, make sure your amenities are checked off. Because then also, and again, you touched on this earlier, but adapt pricing to each OTA's audience. You know, like the top managers, the top property managers in the industry recognize that travel behavior isn't the same on each platform. Every channel has its own avatar. Like you said earlier, John, with Booking.com, it's a different guest than you would get on Vrbo, and Vrbo is a very different guest than you would get on Airbnb. So again, adjusting the length of stay, the cancellation policies, just mastering each individual channel and see how you can outrank your competition and just increase visibility on those channels.
I like it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John. Thank you, Frank, and everyone who joined here this session today. We established that improving Airbnb ranking is one of the highest leverage actions a property manager can actually take, and understanding the win to release keeps you actually actionable items. I was joined today with John from Wheelhouse, with Frank from Hostfully, and myself from Otrank and Otamiser. We specialize in listing optimization and ranking optimization on Airbnb and multiple OTAs. We will share with you the replay and the summary shortly. Thank you very much for joining. And if you want to ask the guys here a question, go and search them on LinkedIn, and we'll probably love it when you just drop them a message.
Yeah, we're here for you. Ask away. That's what we're here for. And can I also say we're very on brand? Like, look at us. It's the holiday season. We got hunter green, maroon, brown. I like the visuals. Talking about content and visual.
Exactly.
Visibility on the webinar.
Exactly. We are in season. Thank you guys very much. And if you have any questions for them, just hit them in. Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.